Welcome to John Martin Talks, where we battle ignorance and apathy daily. The growing ignorance of just how special this experiment we call the United States of America is, and the apathy that we can't or won't do anything and everything to save her. Well, ladies and gentlemen, let me just tell you, this first story could simply be titled American Concentration Camps, Truth or Fiction. So we've got an eyewitness, apparently, to the atrocities that are being committed on simple immigrants to this country. Not illegal aliens, of course, but migrants, the poor migrants that are coming to this country. And that expert is none other than OcasioCortez to the rescue. This first story comes to you from the New York Post. AOC says migrants forced to drink toilet water after tense border visit, according to the New York Post, or at least according to OcasioCortez. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez claims border agents are forcing migrants to drink out of toilets. Illegal immigrants, really. I'm going to correct that every time I see it. Drink out of toilets and live under other extreme conditions. How much more extreme could it be than drinking out of a toilet? While the officers sit back and laugh. I wonder if the toilets are flushed first before they're forced to drink out of them. Now, if true, this is terrible, right? If this is true, let me just say right now, if it's true, this would be terrible, and we would be in Miss Ocasio-Cortez's debt for bringing this up. But, why am I a bit skeptical? Are you a bit skeptical about this? I'm just a wee bit skeptical about this in general, because I just don't think we would do this. She also talks about some behavior of Border Patrol people, and we'll get into that in just a moment. But I'm just a wee bit skeptical, and part of it is because of all the ridiculous BS, as the president would say, that people like AOC and the rest of the progressive left have been lobbing at us for decades now. Of course, she's only been on the scene a couple of years, and that's more than enough for me, but she is the gift that keeps on giving. All right, let's get into the meat of this story. The Congresswoman tweeted Monday after leaving a U.S. Customs and Border Protection facility in Texas. She said, "I see why Customs and Border Patrol, CBP, officers are being so physically and sexually threatening towards me." So is she saying she's the victim? Now, she's saying that while she was there, not alone, by the way, she was with other congressmen and women, at least whatever they channel, I suppose. But is she saying she's the victim? Now, keep in mind in this story, let me just tell you, and I know this is an absolute fact, and I've seen it, documented, personal experience. You can just take this to the bank. Look it up if you choose, but you can, trust me, bank on this. Whenever congressmen and women, whether it's individually or collectively, go on some type of official visit like this, they are always accompanied by the Capitol Police. That is why, if you remember, when the Republicans, like Steve Scalise, who was shot at that baseball, baseball practice that they were at, the Capitol Police were able to intervene and stop that from being worse than it was, because and I'll say it again, when congressmen and women go anywhere in groups, the Capitol Police are always with them. And even individually, they are quite often always with them. The only exception to this would be if an individual congressman or woman decided they were going home, let's say to their district for like 4th of July break, and they just said, look, all I'm doing is flying straight home and I'm not doing anything. The Capitol Police might stand down on that particular occasion. But basically, if anything, and I don't mean this really as a criticism, but if anything, the Capitol Police are overkill on this. They literally are trying to protect the congressman going into a McDonald's, so to speak. So this idea, right off the bat, that Ocasio-Cortez by herself, or certainly with this group of other congressmen and women, were not surrounded at all times by the Capitol Police. Therefore, the point I'm trying to make is that if anyone, let alone border security people, were trying to sexually accost OcasioCortez, that just ain't going to happen with the Capitol Police around. I'm sorry. I just find that impossible to believe. But that's what she says. All right, so we're going to move along here. She went on to say officers, talking about the Border Patrol, were keeping women in cells with no water and had told them to drink out of the toilets. Man, this is pretty terrible stuff, right? This was them on their good behavior, she says, in front of members of Congress. So she's implying that Border Patrol agents, knowing that congressmen and women, maybe even reporters, I don't know if they were there or not, looking over them, are acting like idiots and making these women, I think it's important that they note women, drink out of the toilet. You know, I mean, are you skeptical of this? I'm still a bit skeptical. She went on to say, I brought it up to their superiors. They said officers are under stress and act out sometimes, no accountability. Now, let me just say this. Am I saying that it's not possible that Border Patrol agents would be abusive to people, especially, I don't know about abusive to people under the heat of the cameras, so to speak, or the heat of congressmen and women, because I think they'd be a bit smarter than that. Just assume that she's right and that they are treating these people heinously. I'm not saying they are, but let's assume for the sake of conversation, and you know what they say about that they are. The reason I'm skeptical of what she's saying, but I am not saying that people in positions of authority don't abuse that, because certainly it would be right for that. So I know for a fact that some of this type of stuff happens in like prisons and things like that. So I'm not absolving them in any way, but I'm really skeptical that they would act out in front of Ocasio-Cortez. I just don't think they would be that dumb. Ocasio-Cortez claimed that she forced, check this out now, she forced herself into a cell with a group of female migrants, illegal aliens, and began speaking to them. Now, I'm not saying it didn't happen, it's just I'm skeptical. Because think about this, she is describing these Border Patrol agents as being basically brutish thugs, right? And I'm assuming that most of them are men that she's talking about because they're attacking women, right? Now, these brutish thugs that are doing all this, they have the audacity to do all of this in front of Ocasio-Cortez, are now going to allow this young gal, who is, I'm not knocking her, she's not like, a big brute herself, that she's going to force her way past these guys into the cell with these women. It just seems a bit overstated to me. Let's put it that way. She goes on to say one of them talking about the women in the cell that she forced her way into, one of them described their treatment at the hands of officers as psychological warfare, waking them up at odd hours for no reason, calling them, I assume this is saying whores, etc. This is her tweet. Tell me, what about this is due to a lack of funding? Well, there you go. She's basically making an excuse for the lack of funding from Congress on this and the fact that they've ignored it. No crisis at the border. There's no crisis. It's a manufactured situation, is it not? By President Trump and others that are trying to, just be prejudiced, that want to keep this country closed, that we want it to be closed to outsiders. So I'll say to Ocasio-Cortez that if true, if what you're reporting is true, then what we need to do is build the wall, like I've been saying, build the wall. It's better for us all. We need to do it. You need to get behind the idea, Miss Ocasio-Cortez, of build the wall, better for us all. So, I'm still, as I say, skeptical. But she said the freshman legislature, planning to visit detention facilities in Clint where the Trump administration was denying children toothpaste and soap. Now, I can tell you, that particular part of this story, the idea that we are denying children toothpaste and soap, has been largely debunked. Am I saying that there's not a shortage of this at these facilities? Quite possibly true. But there's a difference between a shortage and trying to figure that out and denying. Denying means you have it, you just won't let them get it. And that has been debunked completely. She said, this has been horrifying so far. It's hard to understate the enormity of the problem. We're talking systematic cruelty with dehumanizing culture that treats them like animals. Could this be true? Sure, it could be true, but let's dig just a wee bit deeper. A Border Patrol official denied the toilet accusations on Monday, insisting that the locations Ocasio-Cortez visited have standard issue jail-type appliances with sinks that dispense safe drinking water attached to toilets in a single unit. And Billy Bob here, if you hadn't met my psychic sidekick, this is Billy Bob Bass. I'm a fish whisperer, the old salty dog. That's why I'm red. I spend a lot of time on the sea. But he tells me that we have a picture of basically what we're talking about down there as far as the apply. There you go. That is and I can tell you from personal experience, both from visiting facilities and actually being in one. If you hadn't listened to my show in the past, and I'm always honest about this, won't get into too much detail at the moment, I have in the past. I had my own personal demons, and I had my own problems with drugs and alcohol, to the point that it landed me into a facility that had one of that. And no, it wasn't a Holiday Inn, okay? So I'm much better now. I've been clean and sober for over 30 years. But I can tell you, this is very normal in any kind of institutional like jail setting. Now, you can understand why they would use something like this, because it can't really be damaged and it can't be used as a weapon. Porcelain toilets, for instance, can be easily shattered and cause disruption, and also can then be, the pieces of them can be fashioned into blades. And believe me, that is why they went to this system, because of weapons. I'm not necessarily saying these women were going to turn them in weapons, but this is standard thing. So the water coming into that, because think about this. In a sense, we're all drinking toilet water, aren't we? You do realize, of course, now some of you snowflakes out there this might be a shock to you, but the water that comes into your house, generally speaking, that comes into your bathroom sink that you might gargle with, is the same water in the same pipe that connects to the toilet, and they all go out the same way. I hate to tell you, that's plumbing 101. So this is what Ocasio-Cortez is saying women are forced to drink out of the toilet. Now, if they want to bend their head down there and drink out the toilet, so be it. But I think they have a second alternative there. I'm just saying. But as I say, I've actually used this myself. Officials said no one is drinking toilet water. They're drinking portable water from the sink attached to the toilet. It's what you would find in every municipal jail in the United States. Hey, that's it. It makes a lot more sense, right? Ocasio-Cortez has accused the Border Patrol agents of making threats to her life on social media, saying a secret Facebook group of 9,500 officers discussed making a GoFundMe to harm her and other Dems during their visits on Monday. Now, this apparently has some ring of truth to it. It's under investigation about this Facebook group, and there's really not enough details, at least at this moment, to get into it. And I'm not trying to defend it, but then maybe I am. Let me just tell you, it would not shock me at all if there was some type of Facebook group and people said, hey, we ought to do a GoFundMe group to take these yahoos out, People say stuff like that all the time without actually meaning it. So, is it correct for them to do that? Right? No. Is it potentially understandable? Not necessarily acceptable, but understandable? Yeah. I doubt it's exactly the way Ocasio-Cortez is presenting it. She goes on to say, this isn't about a few bad eggs that she tweeted that Monday afternoon. This is a violent culture. Now, let me speak to that specifically. I agree with you in one sense, Ms. Cortez. Our southern border has basically an ancient history of being a violent place. I mean, they've literally made movies about this. I don't remember ever seeing a movie, for instance, and I'm not trying to say get your history from movies, but I don't ever remember seeing one that showed like peace, love, and people dancing around in dandelions at the border. It's always about violence, whether it's cowboys and Indians or Mexican bandits or, American marauders, if there is such a thing. I mean, there has been a consistent, persistent violence at the border, which, by the way, is another reason to build the wall. better for us all. And also, you combine the I hate to say natural, but basically the continuous violence that is at our border, our southern border. I wonder why we don't have that much at the northern border. But man, it's something for a different day. But you combine the violence, which I admit is there, and the cult of death, which no one ever really wants to talk about except on shows like JMT, the cult of death that basically is prevalent through South, Central, and Mexico. All that area down there has variations of a cult of death. If you don't believe me, we talked about this on one of my previous shows, which, by the way, the easiest way to see any of my previous shows is to go directly to John Martin Talks Facebook page. Like it, please, if you hadn't already, and share it with others. Follow me if that's what you choose. We're pushing close to 13,000 followers now. I'm grateful for that. But you can see all of our video library there. We also have a YouTube channel that is not really up to date, but it has about a year's worth of our videos, including some of the shows I'm talking about, and that is John Martin Talks YouTube. We're getting ready to kick that back up a gear pretty soon. But this cult of death down there, one story I reported on is there's literally a group of mothers in Mexico that their whole kind of mission in life now is to find their dead children, their buried dead children. And if you don't believe it, just Google it. But remember, Google is of the devil. So you combine this kind of cult of death from the southern part of our hemisphere and what I would hate to say, but it's just fact, natural violence at the border, and you've got a very volatile mix. So could it produce agents that are less than scrupulous? There's no doubt about it. I'm sure there are plenty of them. I won't say plenty, but there are some for sure. There's no doubt about it. But the act that they would do this in front of her and the Capitol Police, I find that a bit of a stretch. Now, and also keep this in mind, and I'm just making a point of this because kind of, maybe I'm overstating this, but by inference by OcasioCortez, it's probably you're picturing a bunch of white dudes picking on a bunch of brown people, right? And I'm not saying that doesn't happen, but the reality is the Border Patrol, by a pretty good margin, over 52%, according to the Houston Chronicle, and this was a few years ago, so it's even more so now, are actually of Hispanic descent. So keep that in mind, that what she is saying actually is that, unless it's just only the white dudes, that a bunch of Hispanic border guards are torturing their fellow Hispanic people. I still am a bit skeptical about that. But the last thing I would say on this, and we'll move on, I would ask Mr. Ocasio-Cortez, let's just assume for the sake of conversation that any of your story is true. Now, we know the part about the toilets. I showed you the toilets a few minutes ago. Is just simply a fabrication on her part, an exaggeration, if you will, political expediency, if you will. But I would ask her, Ms. Ocasio-Cortez, if any of this is true, what exactly are you proposing to solve this? Because you just said, what has it got to do with money, even though the Democrats haven't given any money for this for quite a while, refused to actually help the president on this. And I'm not just talking about the border wall, by the way. In general, they have lagged behind supporting it. Now, there was just a bill signed, I believe, yesterday by the president to bring some money to this much needed situation. But what is your solution specifically? Because if you listen to the Democrats, and I know you've said similar things, but if you watch the Democratic debates this past week, you will see that their solution is an open border and an endless welfare state, which is the combination to destroy America. The summation of an open border and endless welfare state is the ruination of America. If you don't believe that's what they're for, then first of all, you need to get woke and see what's happening. But just go back. All you got to do is go back, just search it out, but be careful where you search, and look at the debate on Thursday night when the question was asked by a show of hands, how many of you are for giving free universal health care to migrants? They wouldn't say illegal, but that's what they were talking about. And everyone raised their hand. Oh, Joe Biden, of course, he went like, but the Democratic Party has now officially if you just count the fact that everybody, and I'd say it's official if they're all for it, that's running for 2020 office for the Democratic primary for president, they're all for open borders, decriminalizing people coming across the border, and an endless welfare state. They're for giving illegal aliens benefits that American citizens don't have, which is absolutely insane. So, okay, more evidence. We're going to move on to our next story, and this comes to you from The Hill. More evidence that our border is in chaos. Billy Bob tells me we got a song that actually we ought to play about this right before we do the story that kind of sums this up. We got that song, Billy Bob? Man, Little Richard, man, you can't get enough Little Richard. If you don't know about Little Richard, shame on you. You need to get you some love from Little Richard. But you keep a knocking, but you can't come in. This is from The Hill. Border crossings shut down after large and unruly group forms in Mexico. U.S. authorities closed an international border bridge in El Paso, Texas, early Monday in response to Central American and Cuban migrants, illegal immigrants, protesting on the Mexican side of the border. You may get tired of me continuously, but I'm determined to not fall into political correctness. I'm not saying they're all bad people, so don't freak out, but they are illegal immigrants. They're not migrants just, applying. They're illegal immigrants. So I'm going to keep doing that. The protesters in Juarez were chanting, "Vayamos cruzar," which means we're going to cross. In other words, they're at the border. They're saying, we're coming over. Before Customs and Border Protection officials closed the bridge about 2 a.m., reported CNN. 2 a.m. So they're out there. I mean, don't they have something better to do than to be out on this bridge at 2 a.m.? So just what we need, just what the country needs, more lawlessness at our border. More people demanding that think about this, their first act as supposedly asylum seekers is to violate our laws, in this case in somewhat of a violent way, making demands upon us. Why don't they make demands upon the country they came from? But they're going to make demands upon us. Think about this, ladies and gentlemen, and I don't think people talk about it's not the right analogy. I've heard some on the left, but it is. How would you feel about someone basically kicking your door in and demanding entry into your home because it is their right to have it, and basically the right to have everything you got in there? In Florida, I think you'd stand your ground and they might be a bit in danger. But here we're supposed to just let them in. Come on in. It's just crazy. But local TV station KTSM reported the group was comprised of about 250 Cuban and Salvadorian migrants. The Juarez newspaper El Dorado had a slightly different account. It said the group was comprised of Cubans and Hondurans. The one thing that both reports said is Cubans. So it's like 250 Cubans at our border in Mexico. Now, Cubans coming to America generally come through Florida, don't they? And so I'm a little skeptical about this as well. I'm not saying they weren't there, but whether they're actually, asylum seekers, I have my doubts about that. Sounds a bit organized to me. And beyond that, I thought Cuba was paradise. I mean, now that Castro is gone, even though we still have a dictator there, still the people have, think about this in Cuba. I mean, this is coming from people I know that have been there and are now citizens of this country. It's actually illegal to go shirtless in Cuba. You might see so, but it's actually illegal to go shirtless. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. I've been told by some Cuban immigrants that is the case there. So Cuba is supposed to be paradise. Why in the world would anybody go? Think about this. They go all the way from Cuba to our southern border in Juarez, Mexico, when it's only 90 miles from Havana to Miami. And the Cuban people, man, I have much love and admiration for Cuban people. I really do. And I say this kind of jokingly, but it is somewhat true. I mean, you remember a few years ago, they caught some Cubans that took like a 55 Chevy pickup truck and turned it into a boat. I tell you right now, if you can turn a 55 Chevy into a boat, we should not only let them in, but maybe we should send them to NASA, because that's some hell of an engineering. But the Cuban people, to have 250 people, look at the geography of how they'd have to traverse to get to Juarez, Mexico. This sounds extremely staged to me. It just does. And on a side note, I didn't have time to cover it, but you can look it up. There are reports that there are as many as 35,000 people from African nations in Mexico right now planning to try to cross our border. And some of them come from regions infected with Ebola. Just a side note to make you happy, something to think about over 4th of July. The Mexican National Guard deployed troops to the area, but they did not engage the protesters, according to El Dario. Mexican National Guard. Now, why would they be there? Probably because Donald Trump has put pressure on Mexico to get involved. So even though they didn't actually engage with these people, the fact that they showed up at all is remarkable progress and a big change under the Trump administration and the current regime of Mexico, because in the past, they would not do this. So, I'm just telling you what's happening down at our border. It is chaos down there. It is not manufactured. It is a real crisis. And it's time for us to come together, OcasioCortez, and actually do something besides pandering and making up ridiculous bullshit like you're doing. Let's move on. Trump is looking very strong. This is kind of connected, and this is coming from the Hill. Trump is looking very strongly at delaying the census. So the question is, to census or not to census? Because by April 1st of next year, we're supposed to have the 2020 census completed. So it takes a while to print all that out. So the clock is definitely ticking. President Trump said Monday he's looking very strongly at delaying the 2020 census if the administration is not allowed to add a citizenship question. Basically, they just want to ask you, are you a U.S. citizen or not? An unprecedented move that would surely trigger new legal challenges. Now, I don't blame President for thinking about trying to delay this, because this whole idea that we can't ask the simple question, are you a U.S. citizen or not? It doesn't say you got to get out. It's simply asking, are you a U.S. citizen? Is a vital question on many levels. And I'll tell you about one very specific and why they don't want, they being the progressive left, and unbelievably, our Supreme Court that we're supposed to have a conservative majority on won't allow this to happen. It's ridiculous, and we'll talk about that. But I'm going to tell you specifically why they don't want this question in just a moment. But Trump said, we're looking at that, he told reporters at the White House. So you can ask other things, but you can't ask, talking about what you can ask on the census. You can ask other things, but you can't ask whether or not somebody's a citizen. So we're trying to do that. We're looking at that very strongly. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't care what side of the issue you're on this. If you're reasonable at all, maybe I'm unreasonable. But shouldn't the question of whether you're a U.S. citizen, and by the way, this is not something new. This was done for years and years and years. It was only stopped in the last decade, I think under Obama, but don't totally quote me on that. But shouldn't this question of citizenship be fundamental to this? I mean, shouldn't it be basic whether or not you're a citizen of the United States? I mean, should be one of the things that we just need to know, right? Because a lot of things are predicated on that answer, including the most important one, and I'll tell you in just a moment. I'm giving you that teaser, right? Trump first floated a delay of the census last week after the Supreme Court blocked the administration from including citizenship question, demanding the Commerce Department, this is what the Supreme Court did, demanding the Commerce Department provide a more clear-cut explanation for the move. Clear-cut. I mean, how much more clear can it be? Are you a U.S. citizen or not? I mean, give me a break, man. These Supreme Court judges, aren't they, regardless of what side they are, aren't they supposed to be the best and the brightest? I mean, a clear cut, how much more clear cut could it be that are you a citizen or not? I mean, I don't understand. For the life of me, I can't understand how anybody would argue against that unless they're trying to seek political power and or the destruction of America. Then they might have a reason. The president said it's crucial the question be asked because it's very important to find out if somebody's a citizen as opposed to an illegal. At least he actually has the courage to say that. He said without citing evidence that immigrants living illegally in the U.S. are treated better than the coal miners suffering from black lung. Well, the evidence is clear without citing evidence, man. I'm going to talk about that in just a second. But the evidence is clear that we have a lot of illegal immigrants in this country and they are taxing our resources. There's tons of evidence of that. Tons of evidence of that. And here's what gets me about this, quote, evidence. Have you noticed that conservatives are the only one that have to supply evidence? I mean, OcasioCortez can get up there and say, we got 12 years to live. And Beto O'Rourke and Paco, whatever you want to call him, Robert Francis, can double down on it. We only got 10 years to live, you know. And they can just say all of this stuff, but they never cite any real evidence. They just say scientists say or, you know, believe in the science. But they don't present the science that says we only got 12 years to live. And think about this. Like, I get a kick out of this, and one of the reasons why I quit fooling with some of the left on Facebook. I got some buddies here locally, because I live in a bastion, man, of liberalism here in Alachua County. If you want to know where I live, I won't give you the specific area of our hidden bunker here, so our zone, but I am broadcasting from the general area of Gainesville, Florida. If you want to know where that is in Alachua County, all you got to do is look at one of those red blue county maps. And in Florida, I'm that big blue county up in the north central part surrounded by red. It looks like a blue lake in a sea of red. I've been living in a blue wave, and I love the University of Florida here in Gainesville. I'm a Gator, by the way, just so you know. And I love this area to a certain extent, but man, do we have to put up with some liberal crap here you would not believe. And I'll talk about it from time to time. But I used to on Facebook, and I would challenge some of my buddies on there about some stuff. And every time, it didn't matter what I said, they would immediately say, where's your evidence? You need to, like I have to give some whole bibliography of something, you know, chapter and verse and everything about anything I said that deviated from there. Now, they could put out any old claptrap BS they want, no evidence whatsoever, because their stuff is not based on science at all. It's based on feelings. Nothing more than feelings. I mean, and they just want to feel good about something. I was listening to a show on the way in, a satellite broadcast I was listening to, and they were talking, this one person was pointing out that, talking about, this just shows you how crazy the environmentalists got. They'd gone to this resort, big Marriott resort, it's one of the biggest, you know, resorts in the world. Marriott chain is one of the biggest hotel chains there is. And they said that they brought them a drink with a plastic straw. And the person said, well, why can't I have, I mean, not a plastic straw, a paper straw. And they said, well, why can't I want a plastic straw. And they said, oh, well, we can't do that. We no longer do the plastic straws because of the environmental concerns. This is Marriott now. But here's the leftist logic. The drink was brought in a plastic cup. So they brought a plastic cup of a drink with a paper straw, thinking they're doing the environment good because, and there's more plastic in the cup than the straw. But hey, it made them feel good. It made people feel like they're doing, hey, I'm sipping out this paper straw in a plastic cup. Never mind the hypocrisy of that, but it feels so much better. It may not work. You may be going, you know, like that, but it makes you feel better. I mean, but conservatives are the only one that have to present evidence. That's why I say there is no double standard. There's only one standard. There's a standard for conservatives, like in this case, you must present evidence, and there's no standard for the left. They can just put, matter of fact, they do the opposite, like saying women are drinking out of the toilet when they're actually drinking out of a sink. It's crazy. But the High Court's ruling may preclude the question from being added to census forms. The Commerce Department has said it faces a July 1st printing deadline, but it could be pushed back to the end of October under extenuating circumstances. I think the fact that we got people from Cuba threatening to cross the border in Juarez, Mexico might be, and 35,000 Africans, that might just be extenuating circumstances. I don't know. But why take the census at all? If we're not going to ask that question, why take it at all? And now I'm going to tell you the main reason. The main reason that the progressive left does not want this question on the census is because it's all about House seats. The House of Representatives of the U.S. government is determined by your state is determined how many House seats by its population. That's why, for instance, places like New York are actually losing House seats and lost one in the last census, I believe, because their population is dropping, and places like Florida and Texas, their populations are gaining, so they're gaining House seats. So the left wants to gain more House seats, and guess what? They have calculated that the more illegal immigrants you can pile into a state and be counted as some type of citizen variation, the more likely you are to have a House that is dominated by the Democrats. The census, if we don't get a handle on this, and there's a couple of other things I would say about this, if we don't get a handle on this, the conservatives, Republicans will stop winning any elections, let alone national elections. Trump said last week he was asking his legal advisors to examine whether a delay is possible, which is one more reason to build the wall, right? Now, what this basically means is, and this is what I see, okay? I've been thinking about this a lot lately, about the 2020 primary and everything else. We're being quickly divided into basically two camps. Of course, there are people who are just so indifferent that they'll never pay attention. There's not much you can do about that. But we're going to be divided basically into two camps. And I'm not just talking about Republicans and Democrats, although it may shape up that way. I'm talking about people who believe in the republic, who believe in the U.S. Constitution and the rule of law and the God-given inalienable rights of the individual. That's going to be on one side. And everybody else that wants to basically destroy America might improve it. I doubt it, but they might. But it would destroy America on the other side. And that's really what this census question comes down to. I'm starting to believe that whether or not we can reelect President Trump, and I know this sounds really dramatic, but I'm really coming to believe this, that if we don't reelect President Donald Trump, we're probably doomed to the other side winning. I'm really starting to believe that, because President Trump may be certainly our best, but it may be our last hope to actually get the ship righted and get people truly woke to how special this experiment we call the United States of America is, because it is not guaranteed at all. Like Ronald Reagan said, it's not naturally in the bloodstream. It has to be cultivated, educated into each generation. This torch, this flame of liberty has to be, and I'm paraphrasing that a bit, but I honestly believe that we're coming to that point, to the tipping point. If we're not there already, we may have already lost, but I know this: if President Trump is not reelected, then I don't have a high hopes for us withstanding this deluge of leftist crap that is trying to destroy America, undermining us. That, to me, is ultimately the choice we have to make. And I say that to people who are Democrats or independents or whoever. You got a choice to make. Because that other side, if we keep going the way they're going with this, we're done as the nation. That's why I'm on here every single day. It's not easy showing up here every day. I enjoy it. Don't misunderstand me. I get a kick out of it. But every day I wake up a little bit. I wake up at like 5 o'clock in the morning to get ready for this show. And every day it's getting a little harder sometimes to wake up and go, man, do I really? And yes, I do. I really do want to continue to do this. I need your support to continue to do this. And we're going to talk about some of that as the weeks progress, how you can help support fighters like me. Because I tell you, not everybody can be a fighter, but everybody can support those in the fight. And we here at JMT are determined to stay in that fight. So we'll give you more details about that. But I firmly believe that I have an obligation to battle ignorance and apathy on a daily basis. And as long as I got this microphone, that's what I'm going to do. But this story here, the president, next story, the president doing what he can. Because President Trump, love him, hate him, whatever. Is he doing everything he should? I don't know. You could argue that. Is he doing everything he could? You could probably argue that. But I think the president is working as hard as he possibly is. There anybody that you remember? They talk about the president golfing all the time, which is a bunch of nonsense. But President Trump has got to be one of the hardest working, if not the hardest working president that we've ever had. Look how hard he campaigned, but look what he's had to deal with just in the last week, from the G20 summits to dealing with Iran and all that. We're going to talk about that more in just a minute, to all this border stuff, to having time to, oh, by the way, swing by and make a historic visit into North Korea. I mean, this man is unbelievable. But this comes to you from NBC News. Trump says more deportations ahead after Independence Day. President Donald Trump said Monday that Immigration and Customs Enforcement is going to be increasing deportations of undocumented immigrants after Independence Day. He says, this is what the president said, after July 4th, a lot of people are going to be brought back out. He told this to the Oval Office where he was signing that bill I was talking about earlier, the $4.6 billion bill to deal with the surge of migrants. You know, think about the illegal immigrants. Here I go again. The surge. Now, if true, and it is true, that there's a surge of migrants, who's more to blame for that? Donald Trump? I mean, he is to a certain extent, but in a positive way. Part of where President Donald Trump is to blame is because he's trying to shut it down, right? So people are saying, hey, if Trump is successful, I'm not going to get in, so this might be my last chance. That is how President Trump, you know, by trying to keep his promise, is actually maybe increasing the surge. I'll give you that. But the Democrats, I mean, basically saying, hey, come to America and you can have free health care for all. I mean, you don't think that might actually create an even bigger surge? It's certainly not going to help the situation. But Trump went on to say, so people that come up may be here, talking about to our country, for a short while, but they're going to be gone. They're going to be back to their countries. They go back home. ICE is going to be apprehending them and bringing them back. If you're here, let me just tell you this, and I know this is a blanket way. There's some exceptions, obviously. But if you're here illegally, I'm sorry, but you just have to leave. Now, that doesn't mean you can't come back, go through the legal system and come back. But what nation can allow tens of millions of people to just stay in their country illegally and hope to maintain their sovereignty? It's not possible. We owe it to the sacrifices of all the men and women, including immigrants, by the way, that have made to make this country the exceptional place that it is, that have made it the one where you want to do anything and everything to get here. And I don't blame you. But in order for us to continue to be the country that the world wants to emulate, let alone get here, we have to deal with this problem. We have to, or we're going away. The problem's not going to go away, but we will. On Monday, Trump said they're all coming out of the country because that's what we do. So he's just telling them, hey, we're going to do that. You know, let me just say this, and it kind of ties in with what I said earlier. And this is something frightening to think about. But what if Donald Trump actually is a one-term president? For whatever reason, what if he actually is a one-term president? He's got to do whatever he can possibly do in his first term right now. Because, and I believe he will be a second-term president. I truly believe. But there's no guarantee of that. The only way it's going to happen, by the way, is for us to build that wall politically, so to speak, man the political ramparts so that we don't have to man the real ones. That's why I'm here every day encouraging you to get woke, really woke, motivated, and then get others. I know a lot of my audience is already motivated and going to vote for Trump. I know people that are signed on like for Citizens of Trump, Deplorable Resistance, Media Measures, people who follow my site directly. If you hadn't done so, please do. John Martin Talks. Go there, like it, and share it with others. I know that the vast majority of you, although there are a few that don't, because I hear from you too, and you're welcome to chime in, that you're for Donald Trump. But that's not enough. It's great, it's important, but we need to be, I said this at the local Republican Party the other night, and I kind of paraphrase it a little bit, you know, because I'm a state committee man for the local party. And I said in my turn to speak, I said, you know, and there was about 100 people out there in the audience, local Republicans, which is no easy thing in Alachua County, by the way. But I said to him, I said, look, you may have to become basically political, and I said it, you a-holes. You may have to be that type person that people say, I don't want to talk about politics, I'm tired of, because ultimately, if you let people know that you are studied, researched, and have your stuff together on politics, they may bemoan it in public, but they will circle back around when the time comes and listen to you and ask you questions, and you'll be ready to answer them. That's what it's going to take. You need to be an influencer in your family, in your community. You need to be the person, because I can tell you, people call me all the time right before election and say, you know, I really hadn't paid attention to the issues locally and nationally and everything else. How should I vote? You'd be surprised how many people actually call me directly that personally know me and ask that question. You need to become one of those people if we're going to assure Donald Trump's reelection. That's just my opinion. But if he's only a one-term president, I hope that's not true. But if true, then he needs to work even more than he is, and he's working more than any man I've ever seen. So, you know, that's just the way it is. Let me check my time. Oh, we're doing good. The president praised Mexico for taking steps to slow the number of immigrants traveling through the country to get to the U.S., just like the National Guard called out in Mexico the other day, saying he was dropping his threat of hitting Mexico with tariffs for now. They work, actually, right? He said the Guatemalan government is being cooperative as well. I'm hearing Guatemala is starting to help a lot, Trump said. I don't think they were doing what they could do, and they probably weren't doing anything before you came, sir. So it reminds me of something, you know. I want to tell you a story about MS-13 that I heard from a friend who heard from a friend. So I'm just going to tell you, I'm not saying it's 100% true. I'm just telling you what was reported to me by some people that I have a lot of trust in. It was this one gentleman in particular, and if you're listening, you'll know who you are, is an avid mountain bike person. They do it all over the country, and they got friends that are in the circuit, do it all over the world. He was telling me, this was probably about a decade ago, that down in Guatemala, he had a friend that was participating in one of these rallies, these mountain bike rallies. And while he was down there, there was this prison that had a riot in Guatemala that primarily housed MS-13 gang members. Like I say, I'm not saying this is 100% true. This is just what was reported to me. And that they took over this prison, and that the local Guatemalan officials were so fearful of the MS-13 gang that they did not try to retake the prison. Their solution was to set the prison on fire. So the government set its own prison on fire and just apprehend people as they ran out. That's how crazy they feel about the MS-13 gang members. Now, we know that there's plenty of things that we know for a fact are true. But Pelosi, of course, Nancy Pelosi, the leader of the Democrats, I think it's AOC, but Pelosi is the figurehead anyway. She said that the MS-13 members are divinely inspired. I saw this meme on Facebook the other day, and it showed this thing, and it had this guy that was obviously MS-13. He was tattooed everywhere and had it tattooed on his chest. And they said, you know, not all people with tattoos are crazy, but some like this one will kill you. And I'm kind of preferencing a bit. And it's another thing about, I got to get something off my chest real quick. I don't know if this has happened to you. Facebook is going through all kind of stuff. And oh, by the way, let me just say that this idea that they were potentially sarin attack yesterday is atrocious, and I don't condone that in any way, in shape or form. So I hope that turns out not to be true, but if true, it is a sad deal. But Facebook, you know, I got put kind of temporarily in Facebook jail a while back, or at least one of my memes was taken off. Now, the meme that I put up actually came to me through my news feed. So Facebook, with whatever their algorithm, how they determine it, put this picture in my news feed. I didn't search it out. It was in my news feed, and I thought it was pretty funny, so I reposted it. And they chopped me for reposting a meme that they sent me. Now if that's not a setup, what is? But anyway, I had to get that off my chest. All right, we got one last story here that will tell you just how busy old DJT has been, man. He has been busy. This comes to you from Fox News. Trump delivers stern warning to Iran after calling off retaliatory military strike. You know, he was at the G20 summit in Osaka, Japan. And while he was over there, he gave an extensive interview to Tucker Carlson, who aired some of it last night, and I think is going to air bits and pieces of it the rest of the week. President Trump, after calling off, that's what they're talking about where he said this. President Trump, after calling off a military strike in Iran following the downing of an American drone last month, delivered a stern warning to the regime during an interview with Fox. Speaking exclusively with Tucker Carlson, Trump said he built up a lot of great capital after his decision to not strike Iran, to, quote, pull back. They made it sound like, the original reports made it sound like we were literally on our way and he pulled them back. Trump later explains in this article that they never actually launched anything. He curtailed it before they actually launched. That's what he says here. If something should happen, we're in a position, this is the grave or dire threat part. If something should happen, in other words, Iran does something else or we decide to hit, we're in a position to do far worse by not doing it. What they're saying is, it's a little chopped up there. What the president is saying, by calling off the airstrike that we were justified in doing after an attack by Iran on our drone in international waters, that's pretty much been proven now, that we would have had the right, every right to hit back at them. But because they pulled back, that gives him even more credibility if they do something else. In other words, a second strike, even though they've had 100 strikes already, that we can hit them full force and feel totally justified. I think that's pretty much what he means. He quickly added, but hopefully we don't have to do anything. And I hope so too. Democrats, think about this. The Democrats actually criticized President Trump. We covered a little bit of this last week, but the Democrats actually criticized President Trump for not killing Iranians, for not striking Iran with some type of, maybe the mother of all bombs like he did in Afghanistan. Bernie Sanders, of all people, criticized. The Democratic Party has become the party of perpetual war. I mean, their Trump derangement syndrome is just off the charts, man. The president's comments were made before it was reported Iran has exceeded the threshold for the Islamic Republic's low-enriched uranium stockpile agreed upon in the 2015 nuclear deal. In other words, the deal that Trump got us out of, that Obama gave, not only signed, but gave them pallets full of cash, they violated it. And the Europeans are still a part of it. Now, I'm shocked, I say, that the Islamic Republic of Iran would violate a deal? I'm not shocked at all, are you? Monday afternoon, the White House released a statement outlining how the U.S. will continue to pressure Iran. This is coming from Press Secretary Stephanie Grisham, who is off to one heck of a start, is she not? I mean, think about that. She goes from kind of no one knows her to being in the middle of a melee in North Korea. Maximum pressure, she said, on the Iranian regime will continue until its leaders alter their course of action. The regime must end its nuclear ambitions and its malign behavior. Let me tell you, the sanctions, and that's kind of what she's talking about, maximum pressure, they're actually working. And if we could get some help from the Europeans and stop cheating on it and some other countries, they would work even harder. But the sanctions are working from every bit of research I've done. During this interview with Carlson, Trump reveled in the praise he was given for not going through the retaliatory strike. He says, President Trump said, I was given a lot of credit by most people. A lot of people gave me credit and then, of course, Carlson pushed back a little on the pullback. He said, the president went on to say, a lot of people said there was a great presidential moment, which, as you know, is rather shocking to hear. Yeah, it is. If they're actually, anybody's actually praising Trump in the media, it's besides maybe Sean Hannity, it's pretty rare. Let me check my time. We've only got a few minutes left, and I want to cover something. I'm going to skip through here a bit because I want to talk to you about, because President Trump makes a strong case that we cannot allow Iran to have a nuclear weapon, and he says he's going to stop them basically at any cost. There is a very specific reason. The Republic of Iran believes in what they call the 12ers. They have a 12er belief, and I'm going to explain that to you in the time that I have remaining. This is why we have to stop it. It's an apocalyptic belief. And this is actually something I pulled out of my research. Iran is a fervently Shiite Islamic republic with a 98% Muslim population. There are some Christians under fire there. And 89% of those Muslims identifying as Shiite according to CIA World Factbook. So they're 98% Muslim, 89% of them are Shiite. That's very important because in the Shiism, they believe there's a group that believes in what they call 12er Shiism, is the largest branch of the Shiite Islam and by far the largest in Iran, with about 85% of Shiite Muslims adhering to the belief in the 12th Imam. So basically what they believe is there's 12 Imams to come, or they're in general. 11 of them have already been here, but the 12th one, kind of like a Messiah figure, has yet to be born. And Ayatollah Khomeini, the original one, the father of Islamic Revolution in Iran, was a 12er. In other words, he believed this. And this is going to be clear in just a moment. So the current supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, and President Mohammed Ahmadinejad, I hope I don't, that's old salty, it's hard for me to say these names. They all believe it. So basically the ruling class in Iran are what they call 12ers. And the reason this is important is this right here. They believe that a series of imams was appointed to carry on Prophet Muhammad's message, and that these imams rank above all other prophets except for Muhammad himself. So these are the supreme of supremes. The 12th Muhammad, Al-Mahdi, is believed by these Shiites to have been born in present-day Iraq in 869 and never to have died. So I misspoke that. He's still there somewhere. They're looking for him. He's, 1,000 years old basically, so he has been born. He's only gone into hiding. They believe that he's going to come out once the world gets chaotic enough. So basically, at the end of times, when it looks like the world is totally destroyed, on the brink of total destruction, that's when he will appear again as a savior, rebuild the Islamic Republic, what they call it, caliphate, all of that type of stuff, and that he will then bring Islam to the world. They sincerely believe this. So if you think about that in relation to an atomic bomb, it would only make sense. Now, these are the people that literally wake up in the morning going, "Death to America," and drive Israel to the sea before they even say good morning to one of them. It's like, "Death to America. How do you want your eggs?" kind of thing. These are the people that believe. They firmly believe now. This is no BS. They absolutely, at least as far as I can tell, believe that this 12th Imam and return to paradise will only come after the world has literally been destroyed. Now, what will do more to destroy the world as we know it than nuclear attack? So the difference between some of these people, and I'll close on this, Kim Jong-un, yeah, he has nuclear weapons and wants more, but they're about recognition. I don't believe that Kim has any intention of actually firing off missiles. I just don't. But these Imams, if they have it and they thought it would bring about this 12th Imam to come out of hiding, I absolutely believe they would do that. And President Trump believes it too. That's why he's trying to do his duty, protect and defend the United States of America and in a sense the world as a whole. Well, I hope you've enjoyed the show today as much as I've enjoyed bringing it to you. Please go directly to John Martin Talk, like our Facebook page, share it with others. We got a growing audience. Thank you so much. I'm going to give you details in the coming days and weeks on how you can support us even further and keep us alive here. But between now and then, as I say every day, from my heart, from my family to yours, have a blessed day. Thank you.